What if I told you that the Pretoria Court ruling against the Lungu family isn't just another legal decision, but a turning point that could reshape Zambia's political future? Inside the courtroom, shocking arguments were made. Some say they reveal deep corruption, others insist it's justice finally being served. The Lungu family has been ordered to pay government lawyers, but here's the twist. This ruling has reignited the burial battle over Edgar Lungu, raising questions of dignity, politics, and power. Is this justice or corruption disguised as law? Stay with us, because what you're about to discover will shake not only Zambia, but also South Africa, where this courtroom drama is unfolding. Justice or corruption? The Pretoria Court has ordered the Lungu family to pay government lawyers in the ongoing Edgar Lungu repatriation case. This ruling has reignited the burial battle, raising questions about whether Lungu deserves a state funeral or whether politics is influencing justice. In this video, we uncover the shocking details of the Pretoria Court ruling, the hidden role of Attorney General Kabesha, and what this means for Zambia's political future under President Hakainde Hichilema, HH. Watch until the end, because the burial battle is far from over. The courtroom showdown, Pretoria, South Africa. The air was heavy with anticipation. Outside the High Court, journalists jostled for position, microphones and cameras ready. Inside, rows of wooden benches filled with observers, some sympathetic to the Lungu family, others quietly cheering for the Zambian government. Everyone knew this was no ordinary case. What had started as a burial request had transformed into an international courtroom drama. Edgar Lungu, Zambia's former president, was dead, but even in death, he divided nations. His family wanted to decide how and where he should be buried. The Zambian government, however, insisted it had a stake in the process. Now, Pretoria's judges were tasked with answering a question no court had faced before: who owns the body of a former head of state? The atmosphere inside was tense. Government lawyers, polished and prepared, laid out their argument. They insisted that state resources had been used throughout Lungu's presidency, and therefore his funeral could not simply be a private matter. The family's lawyers fired back, accusing the state of weaponizing the courts, turning grief into politics, and denying a family the right to mourn in peace. Every word echoed with history. Some compared the trial to the power struggles of ancient empires, where even in death, rulers remained pawns in larger games. As the hours stretched, tempers flared. Papers slammed on desks. Lawyers shouted over objections. The judge raised his hand repeatedly to restore order. And yet, beneath the legal jargon, one truth remained clear. This was not just about a burial. It was about power, legitimacy, and control over the memory of Zambia's most controversial leader. By the end of the day, the court had not yet ruled. But one thing was certain: whatever decision came next would ripple far beyond the courtroom. It would shake families, governments, and even international law itself. The showdown had only begun. The price of justice: when the judge returned to the bench, the courtroom hushed. Pens froze. Cameras clicked. The Lungu family leaned forward, faces tense. On the other side, government lawyers adjusted their files, waiting for what many expected to be a routine order. But what came next left both camps stunned. The Pretoria Court ruled that the Lungu family must pay the government's legal costs. A burial dispute had suddenly turned into a financial war. For Esther Lungu, the widow of the former president, the blow was personal. To pay government lawyers meant humiliation, an admission of defeat in the eyes of the public. For her children, it meant something even worse: financial pressure at a time when their father's legacy was already under attack. Whispers spread instantly. Was this ruling about justice or about punishment? Critics argued that the court had crossed a line, turning a grieving family into debtors. Supporters of the government countered: why should taxpayers foot the bill for endless court battles? But beneath the arguments lay a deeper question: who was really winning here? Lawyers, analysts noted, stood to gain the most. Every filing, every appearance, every appeal meant more billable hours, more money, while the political storm raged on. Behind closed doors, PF insiders warned that this was only the beginning. If the family could not pay, the government might seize assets or push for further sanctions. In Zambia, rumors already circulated that this was not about money at all, but about stripping the Lungu family of influence, reducing them to symbols of defeat. For ordinary Zambians watching from afar, the case no longer looked like a burial dispute. It looked like a chessboard where the family, the government, and the courts each fought for control, while the body of Edgar Lungu remained in limbo. The price of justice, it seemed, was not just financial. It was political. It was emotional. and it was tearing apart the very idea of fairness itself. The question remained, was justice truly being served, or was the court being used as a weapon? A family under siege for the Lungu family, Pretoria's ruling felt less like justice and more like an ambush. In Lusaka, their home became a fortress. Security tightened, phones buzzed with endless calls, and allies streamed in and out, whispering strategies behind closed doors. But inside the walls, tension was suffocating. Esther Lungu, the widow of Zambia's former president, wore a brave face for the cameras, yet those close to her described sleepless nights, private tears, and the weight of carrying both grief and battle at once. Her children, too, felt the sting. Some feared their father's name was being deliberately dragged through the mud, tarnished at every turn. Others worried about their own futures. Would they forever be seen as symbols of corruption or as victims of a political vendetta? Every newspaper headline, every online post seemed to press harder against them. Words like justice and corruption were thrown about carelessly, each one cutting deeper into their already fragile state. And yet, the family refused to back down. To them, this wasn't just a legal fight. It was survival. Behind the scenes, allies urged the Lungus to pay quietly and move on. But others insisted that giving in would be surrender, not just to the court, but to the government they believed was using the case to destroy them. The pressure wasn't only emotional. Financial strain loomed. Paying legal costs meant draining resources they claimed were already stretched thin. And if assets were seized, the humiliation would be complete. Still, the family projected defiance. Esther's rare public remarks hinted at resilience. We will not be silenced. We will not be erased. For their supporters, those words were a rallying cry. For their opponents, they were proof that the Lungus remained defiant, unrepentant, and unwilling to accept reality. Inside their compound, one question echoed in every conversation. Was the family defending dignity or simply resisting justice? Either way, the siege had begun, and the walls around them were closing in. The ghost of state power, officially, the Pretoria High Court, was neutral. Judges wore their robes, arguments were heard, and rulings were read according to the law. But behind the polished wood and legal language, a darker question haunted every observer. Was the Zambian government pulling invisible strings? For critics, the signs were obvious. Why had the court gone so far as to order the Lungu family to pay government lawyers? Why did the case, which began as a burial dispute, suddenly seem to tilt in favor of the state? To many, it felt less like coincidence and more like strategy. Whispers circulated about diplomatic pressure. Some claimed Zambian officials quietly lobbied South African counterparts, framing the Lungus not as grieving relatives, but as symbols of corruption. Others pointed to the unusual speed of filings and hearings, suggesting someone wanted the case resolved on government terms. Inside Zambia, suspicion grew sharper. Opposition members accused the ruling party of using foreign courts to finish what they couldn't achieve at home, complete political and financial destruction of the Lungu family. Even in death, one PF insider said they want to control him. Yet supporters of President Hakainde Hichilema dismissed the allegations. To them, the case was proof that the law was stronger than political privilege. For years, they argued, leaders escaped accountability. Now, even in South Africa, justice is catching up. But the deeper reality was far more complex. South African courts prided themselves on independence, yet the geopolitics of the region could not be ignored. Zambia and South Africa shared trade, intelligence, and diplomatic ties. Could Pretoria really ignore Lusaka's wishes, especially when the case touched the legacy of a man as controversial as Edgar Lungu? The truth was buried in shadows. No documents proved interference. No judge admitted pressure. Yet the ghost of state power hovered, unseen, unspoken, but deeply felt. For the Lungu family, that ghost was their greatest fear. For the government, it was their greatest weapon. And for ordinary citizens watching from both nations, one question grew louder. If politics could follow a man into the grave, what hope did justice truly have? Lawyers, money, and secrets, every great courtroom battle has its winners, and sometimes they are not the ones in spotlight. As Pretoria's ruling spread across Zambia and South Africa, a quieter story emerged. Who really stood to gain from this legal storm? The answer, many whispered, was simple: the lawyers. With each motion filed, each day in court, and each round of appeals, the financial stakes climbed higher. Government lawyers build the state. The Lungu family's legal team build the family. And now, with the shocking order that the Lungus must pay the government's legal costs, the numbers were staggering. Justice had become a business, and business was booming. But it wasn't just about money. Documents leaked to journalists suggested some lawyers were playing both sides, sharing information, and cutting private deals to ensure they remained indispensable no matter who won. Rumors swirled that certain firms had links to politicians, blurring the line between legal strategy and political manipulation. For the Lungu family, the mounting fees were a financial chokehold. To pay meant humiliation and potential bankruptcy. To resist meant endless appeals and even more money spent. They were trapped in a cycle designed, some claimed, to bleed them dry. Meanwhile, government officials framed the fees as accountability. For too long, one spokesperson declared, the powerful have dragged ordinary people through courts without consequence. Now they must pay the price. But critics argued that the real beneficiaries were not citizens, but the lawyers cashing in on the chaos. In whispered conversations among PF insiders, another fear emerged. What if the financial squeeze was part of a larger plan? A plan not only to silence the family, but also to dismantle their network of influence by draining resources at every turn. Justice, corruption, or convenience, no one could say for sure. But one fact was undeniable. In this burial battle, the lawyers were writing their own victory story. And as the bills piled up, one chilling question lingered. In a fight where justice costs millions, who can truly afford to win? The burial that never ends, it should have been simple. A man dies. A family buries him. A nation mourns. But for Edgar Lungu, Zambia's former president, even death offered no peace. Months after his passing, his body remained in limbo, trapped in legal disputes, political battles, and endless appeals. What began as a private family decision had spiraled into an international crisis. The Pretoria Court's ruling only added another layer of delay, ensuring that the burial would not happen anytime soon. For the family, the pain was unbearable. To grieve is human. To bury a loved one is closure. But with Lungu's body still in South Africa, that closure felt impossibly distant. Each court date, each headline, each ruling only deepened their torment. Esther Lungu was said to have whispered to a confidant, "How can a man rest when the world won't let him?" But beyond grief, politics churned. In Lusaka, the ruling party quietly benefited from a spectacle. The longer the burial dragged on, the longer the PF opposition remained divided, distracted, and weakened. Every delay chipped away at the myth of unity within Lungu's camp. For PF supporters, the situation was almost unbearable. How could a man who once ruled Zambia with absolute authority now lie unburied, his legacy contested in foreign courts? To them, it was humiliation, a deliberate act to strip their hero of dignity, even in death. Meanwhile, South African officials struggled to balance diplomacy with legality. To them, this was not simply a Zambian affair. It was now a regional issue, one watched closely by neighbors and global observers. And so the coffin remained, not lowered into the earth, but suspended in time, locked inside a battle that refused to end. For citizens watching, the question grew sharper. Was this about honoring the dead or about controlling the living? The burial that never ends had become a mirror, reflecting not just one man's fate, but the state of justice, politics, and power across Africa. Corruption on trial in the courtroom, the battle was no longer about burial rights. It was about power, money, and justice. The Pretoria judges had ordered the Lungu family to pay the government's legal costs, a decision that sent shockwaves across Zambia. But beneath the legal jargon, one truth became clear. This was not just a burial dispute. It was a corruption trial in disguise. For years, whispers surrounded Edgar Lungu's presidency. Allegations of hidden millions, properties abroad, and money trails stretching from Lusaka to Johannesburg. Critics claimed that the very reason his body remained in South Africa was not family preference, but fear. Fear of what would be uncovered if the body returned home. Inside court, the government's lawyers pushed this narrative hard. They argued that justice could not be separated from accountability. If public funds had been looted, if the presidency had been abused, then even death could not erase responsibility. But the Lungu family countered with equal force. They insisted this was nothing more than political persecution, a calculated attempt to destroy a man's legacy. Esther Lungu's voice trembled with emotion when she said, "My husband served his nation. Why must he now be tried in death?" The media amplified the drama. Headlines blared with phrases like burial battle or corruption cover-up. Analysts debated live on television, asking whether Zambia had crossed a dangerous line, turning funerals into courtrooms. Supporters of the ruling party saw the ruling as justice served. To them, this was proof that no leader, past or present, could escape accountability. But for PF loyalists, it was betrayal, the desecration of a leader who had given his life to Zambia's politics. And in the middle of it all, ordinary Zambians asked a more haunting question. If corruption trials could extend beyond the grave, what did it mean for the future of leadership in Africa? The court ruling was not just about legal costs. It was about rewriting the rules of power. For the first time, corruption itself was on trial, not in the living, but in the dead. The final judgment, the gavel struck. The Pretoria Court had spoken. But was this truly the end, or just another beginning? The ruling was clear. The Lungu family must pay the government's legal fees. The burial, once again, postponed. A judgment delivered in law, but contested in the court of public opinion. For the family, it was devastation. Esther Lungu left the courtroom shielded by aides, her face hidden, her words unspoken. But those who knew her said she whispered, "They will not let him rest." The weight of grief, humiliation, and financial strain pressed down on the family like a curse that would not lift. For the government, the decision was victory. Officials in Lusaka framed it as proof that justice was blind, that the rule of law was supreme. Yet behind closed doors, some admitted privately, the burial dispute had become as political as it was legal. Each ruling carried consequences not only for the Lungu family, but for Zambia's fragile democracy. And for the people, it was confusion. Was this truly justice, or was corruption itself being buried beneath layers of courtroom theatrics? Markets buzzed with debate, radio talk shows exploded with arguments, and social media raged with accusations of betrayal, persecution, and hidden deals. But history teaches us that judgments are not always final. Appeals remain. Protests simmer. International observers watch closely. What seemed like an ending might, in fact, be the opening chapter of a deeper saga. In the streets of Lusaka, PF loyalists vowed to fight on, declaring, "Even in death, Lungu cannot be silenced." While UPND supporters celebrated, calling it a lesson to all leaders, no one is above accountability. And so the story hung unresolved. A body unburied, a family divided, a nation torn between justice and vengeance. The final judgment, it seemed, was not the courts to deliver. It lay in the hearts of Zambians themselves. In the years ahead, they would decide what mattered more, the pursuit of accountability or the preservation of dignity. For now, the coffin remained closed, the grave remained empty, and the legacy of Edgar Lungu, hero to some, villain to others, remained trapped in a twilight of unfinished history. Because sometimes the most powerful judgment is not written in law, but in memory.